Gain control of cyber risk with Tenable.io, the first vulnerability management platform built for today's elastic assets like cloud, containers, and web apps. Discover a fresh, asset-based approach that prioritizes vulnerabilities while seamlessly integrating into your environment. And improve ROI with the first elastic licensing approach based on assets, not IP addresses. Tenable.io delivers the data and context you need to secure your elastic attack surface. Start your free Tenable.io trial today by visiting Tenable.io. IT Pro TV, an easy, entertaining approach to online IT training. Access over 2,000 hours of up-to-date, high-quality video content live and on demand via Chromecast, Roku, Amazon Fire TV, Apple TV, PC, and your mobile device. IT Pro TV's premium membership grants access to all courses, transcripts, virtual labs, and transcender practice exams. Corporate and group pricing are available for a free 7-day trial and 30% off the lifetime of your account. Visit itpro.tv/startup security and use the code SS30. Welcome back, everyone, to Startup Security Weekly. I'm here with Mr. Michael Santarcangelo. We're talking about some startup news. You had some listener feedback first, though, Michael. Is that true? I
did, and I didn't necessarily. I got permission to use it. I don't necessarily have the name, so let me go ahead and read some of this as we go through it. I will say it's actually been a guest on the show, so I've just narrowed the field down a little bit. But this is, and the reason I'm excited about this is when we say, hey, answer back to us. We do email threads offline, and we have these conversations. Yep. And it's getting exciting because this is changing how we're going to ask questions and how we're going to look at things. It's also helping us understand what's important to you. So, active listener writes in and says, all right, so last show, you guys talked about Sophos acquires Invincia for $100 million. And he said it's a bad deal. And he thinks it's going to influence the industry. He said Invincia raised $47 million and sold for $100. So, and he's right. You got to do the math on that. People weren't looking for a 2x, and that's not necessarily really even a 2x when you go and you take a look at it. And when they raised the round, like the question you got to ask is, so your last round was November of 2016. They raised $10 million. So what was the valuation at that time? And then how did they sell relative to that valuation? Did they sell higher? Did they sell lower? And then what you start looking at too is, so what were their run rates in terms of revenue? Now I know a lot of these companies, it's not public knowledge, and so this is where there's some whispers. And I think we've got to figure out at some point, is that information we want to trade in or not? I know on some of the shows we're happy to name names. I think on ours, I'm not sure if that matters or a lot. But what's kind of interesting is you can also take a look at, for example, like how they did with their rollout with Dell. When Windows 8.1 came out, and that may have created some problems with them. So the thing now is, all right, so by the way, and in fact, I'll update this. Did you see the headlines that came out today, or I saw them today, that Symantec was trying to acquire FireEye? And they broke it off, and there's no deal?
I didn't. I should have added it to this show, but I did see that when I was reading the news. Yes.
Yeah, I thought about it, and then I went, oh, man, we got so much to talk about already. But so the point here is, so look at like a deal like this in terms of how it's going to influence the other deals. Look at how it's going to influence Bromium and FireEye and some of these other companies that have these seed rounds of $2 million or more. So now, what do they do, and what does that mean, and how are we going to look at them and value them? So I just that's great feedback in terms of how to start to look at this. And now I will say that based on this, I will start to look for some of those numbers and some of those details. So if you're listening and you have insights on some of these companies, send us the notes. As you can see, we're happy to not trade in rumor and innuendo, but I think these are helpful to look at it, and that's exactly what I was hoping for. So awesome. For the person who gave us the info, thank you. He also went on to say, by the way, too, because if you remember, I mentioned that bit about at beta and at pricing, right? Like you don't want to price yourself too low, you don't price yourself out. And he said that he agrees and disagrees, and he said it actually depends on the product or service that you're selling. If you're doing services, actually his exact words were average salaries for average people that provide average value. I give you huge value, and as a result, you need to pay for that. And he said, so at that, don't charge less for being better. You need to charge more and be proud of charging more. He said, but if you're a software company or you're selling a product you're trying to get established, he's like, you can't charge more for a beta. He stopped short of saying, don't be stupid, Michael. But I think he probably typed it and deleted it. And then, and he said, but listen, he said, keep in mind that because you're in beta, people who work with you initially are going to suffer, and you've got to compensate for that. So yes, they'll get value, but discount it, make it easy for them. I would say that matches up to, we've had other people in the program that talked about traction, and they said, and I think this is where the nuance comes in. We've talked to people in the enterprise, and they say, listen, if you're in a startup, you got to work with us. You're going to have to work with our procurement. You're going to have to work with our legal teams, and the more red flags you throw up, the harder it's going to be for me to do it. But what I've noticed in those folks is they also say, by the way, work with me in year 1, prove your value, and I'll take care of you in year 2. I've seen a lot of deals where that doesn't happen. That's a tactic. Somebody said it. You get to year 2, and they're like, well, you discounted us in year 1. I want a better discount in year 2. If you're an enterprise, knock that off. That helps nobody. That's crap, and you need to stop it. But if you're in the startup realm, there's a level of protecting yourself and then doing what's good for your startup and learning on it. And so the lesson I would say out of all of this is, as you and I talked about, Paul, consider your pricing. Price it high enough to keep out people that are likely to screw you, but then make it attractive for the people that are good people that are going to work with you. I think what we've heard from every founder is it's about relationships. I think what we've heard from every investor is I look at the team and I look at the relationships. I think what we've heard from the enterprise folks that look at startup attraction and adoption, it's all about the relationships. Have a great tech, have a good story, really focus on those relationships. That's what's going to make it work for everybody. It doesn't matter which side of the table you're sitting on. That's the stuff that's the most important. So I love that kind of feedback. I love it too when I have to stop and think about it. And so keep it coming. And thank you for writing that in and letting us share it with everybody. And hopefully that benefits you as you go with it.
Awesome. Startup news this week. The one email every founder should know how to write to investors. That's these taglines are so catchy, Michael.
It's all a clickbait. It's the age of clickbait, right?
It is.
And we have to have really clever ways to say stuff. It's funny, though, because this comes in on the heels of talking about relationships. And the argument is, hey, you raised your round of funding and you spent a lot of time, and that's really great. And so how do you keep people in the loop? And the answer is you keep them in the loop by email. Because, if you raise money for a seed round, you're almost always going to try to move to a next round. I think there's going to be very few situations where you're in a seed round and it's like, oh, cool, we're acquired. Oh, we just merged. Oh, we went. Oh, you're not going to go public off a seed round. So, so the point here is, okay, how do you keep yourself in touch? How do you keep yourself top of mind without being needy, without being whiny? And it basically said, so here's what you got to do. All right, short answer, do it by email. I like the longer answer better. Figuring out how to engage your existing investors right now when you're not actively raising money. That way, when the time comes, they'll not only invest in you again, they'll connect with you with other investors, and they'll serve as glowing references in the process. Let me point out something that I really liked about this. This is called sales. And sales has a dirty word. I mean, Mike alluded to that. But then when we talked to Ralph yesterday, he was all about, hey, guys, you're in security, you're in sales. I was fortunate. I figured it out young in my career. Now, I only now have an appreciation for sales, but I've known it for a long time. Yeah, so if you're not actively engaging somebody, it's kind of like, are there people in your network that would benefit from what you know? Can you have a 20-minute conversation with them on a periodic basis and give them value? That's awesome. That's awesome because they may not be the buyer, but they're going to know somebody who might be the buyer. They might give you feedback. They might give you insights. You can give them value in return, keep them in the loop. And then in the event that they need something, they know to come to you. Well, this is the exact same thing. You're basically saying, thanks for giving us the money. And so I look at it as you want to keep their confidence high. You surprise me. Power companies, right, and other utilities, they advertise. They spend millions of dollars in advertising. And I actually worked with some power companies, and so I said to them, why? I went to their marketing. I said, help me understand this. I don't have a choice. I have to work with you.
And not only that, the power companies want you to use their product less.
Yeah.
Right? Everything about that?
And they said the answer is, well, it's about goodwill. It's about building goodwill. Mm-hmm. It's about building those relationships. And it's about showing you that even though you didn't necessarily have a choice, we still appreciate you and thank you. And by the way, here's all the good things that are happening as a result of it. I think it was BMW or somebody else. They said, most of our advertising isn't actually to get new customers. It's to reaffirm the choice that our current customers made. Mm-hmm. Oh, well, so that's what we're talking about here. So so what it says is you got to have a regular standardized email update, be consistent. Longer isn't better. But, and this is the funny thing. Like, I always like these because people go, well, how long does it need to be? And there's a lot of racy and funny ways to look at it. But this one's good enough. Short enough for an investor to read in the car between meetings. Mm-hmm. There you go. I like it. Hopefully they're not reading while they're driving. Hopefully they're being driven around. Stick with the same categories and metrics. So identify the ones that matter most to your business and then compare this month's with last month's. I will say, I think that is so important, right? We know in Straight Talk, one of the things we look at is how do you measure it? And when we go deeper into that, what I always ask is, what's your baseline? So you can build a trend, what matters most to your business to give you the insights, not just reporting, the insights, and then do you track it on a regular basis? And that's what this is saying.
I also think there should be a different way to look at that as well, is measuring how you're being successful to your customers. Not necessarily your own business, but how are you measuring success with your customers and then reporting on those successes?
I think that's a great point. I think that's a really good point.
I can talk about myself all day long, but when I structure emails like this, I try to structure it as how am I helping you, the customer, or if it's an investor, how am I better serving my customers? And that by itself almost speaks to how my business is doing. Because if I'm increasing value to customers, and that's a win for everyone, right?
Yeah, and what I like about that too is if you're talking about that with customers, what you're probably doing too is you're giving them stories and you're showing them trends. So you don't have to get lost in this whole, your IRR, your ARR, that might be interesting to them. Now here's what it ends with, and I like this. End with one or two asks at the bottom. Investors are always saying they want to be helpful. Let them prove it. What I find is this is akin to commitments, and I told you I've really been enjoying Anthony Iannarino's The Only Sales Guide You'll Ever Need. What's funny is it's a great title for a book. Then he recommends a number of other books, and I've been reading some of them, and they're fantastic as well. So he's really changing my perspective on this stuff. There's a series of commitments you make. You make a commitment for time. You make a commitment to review something. You make a commitment. And so one of the things that I'm finding is that's really useful, and it's a good habit to be in. The ask doesn't have to be, would you write me another check? Could you check on this? Could you introduce me to so-and-so? Would you validate this? They're easy things for people to do, and it's useful. So I think it's important, even if you're not taking money, because as you pointed out, it's good to keep in touch with your customers. It's good to keep in touch with your partners. I think it's good to keep in touch with your early. I think if we treat early adopters as investors at some stage, then I think there's some stuff to do here that I think is useful. Other thing it says is do this even if things aren't going well. And this is something I've noticed. And it's a human tendency. Things aren't going well. I'm going to retreat. I'm going to be quiet. I'm going to wait. They're going to turn around. I know it. I'll tell you something interesting. If you can be brutally honest when things aren't going well and not varnish it, not try to dress it up, not downplay it and not overplay it, just this is what's up. Sometimes those people, if you've built trust with them, might be the ones who reach in and say, oh, well, twist it this way or do this. And you'll be better off. And you're back on the right track. So don't isolate yourself. Like when you're nervous, isolation sucks.
I love this article, Michael, on building a repeatable sales process. I think to put that in a startup context, sales is a scary thing, and building a sales process for the first time, it's a really scary thing in security especially, right? Because you're going to people that you may know from the industry. You've likely been on the other side of it and had your own thoughts and opinions about security vendors, oftentimes probably not very high opinions of many security vendors. And when you go build that sales process, you can get caught up in the wrong things. And I think this article really highlights that having a repeatable process is extremely important. And I can't underscore this enough in the various businesses that I operate, that it's one of the things that I think is very challenging to define that the first time. I think a lot of people are hesitant, and it's okay to make mistakes and then adjust from there and make adjustments as you go. But if you think of it as a repeatable process, I think most people don't even think of it as sales as a repeatable. They think, well, my industry is different, my customers are different, my product is different, so sales is going to be different all the time. No, it's not. You have to build a repeatable process regardless of the business or product or who you're selling to. Now, your various markets or channels or whatever are going to have different sales processes, certainly. But it should be a repeatable process. Direct sales, whether you're selling online, that's a different process. And whether you're doing channel sales, is a different process. But you have to have a repeatable process for all of them. And this article is a great reminder of that.
Yeah, and the thing I always like about this is I'm now starting to look at it from the other side. I think I've mentioned this already on the program, but the other word you'll see a lot is marketing funnel, sales funnel, marketing funnel. And the idea is, right, there's a lot of people that are your addressable market, and there's some that are interested, and there's some that are qualified, right? And so what I've started to learn is the difference between like what they call suspects and prospects is the suspect or the lead. That's everybody that That's and we can narrow it to your addressable market. We should bring up our obligatory Shark Tank. If you go out on Shark Tank and say the whole world is my market, you've completely devalued yourself out of the gate.
That's one of the things you have to nail as a founder of a company. And I'm not saying I get it right all the time, but it's something that should be on the tops of your list that you have to nail in your business, whether it's a startup or whatever. You have to nail who your customer is, and you have to then nail how to get them through the top of that big funnel and down into converting a successful sales lead. Then this article is building on, okay, how do you go do that again?
Yeah, and so what I want to point out on this then is that a lot of times, to your point, you look at it and you're like, I don't need that. No, you do need that. Mm-hmm. But by the way, then realize that if you're being sold, it's okay to go through that process. Like I've now, in the last couple of weeks, I've had people that have reached out, and I've been very comfortable writing back to them to say, this is why you should disqualify me as a lead. And I'm not trying to throw you an objection. I'm not trying to play with your system. Let me just level with you so I'm not wasting your time. You don't waste mine. And if things change, listen, if you want to check back with me in 6 months or a year, that's cool. And I'm good with that. Most times I get a really surprising response of, wow, that's awesome. Thanks. Now, the flip side is I've got some stuff that I've looked at as a business, and I actually went back to the guy and I said, look, this looks compelling, but I got to ask you a question. Am I the right fit? And here's why. I can't answer this question yet. I can answer this. I'm not sure it matches. And what about this? And he wrote back, you know what? You're not a good fit right now, but you're totally a fit for what I've got planned next. Can we keep in touch? Hell yeah, let's keep in touch.
One of the reasons I really like that, Michael, is because a lot of times people get caught up in, we want to target this industry. We want to target companies with this many employees, with this much revenue. Take all those things off the table.
Exactly.
Like have those things, that's fine. But then do an exercise, take all those things off the table. Okay, who am I really selling to? And answer them without any of those like hard and fast quantitative size, industry, and revenue questions. And answer the question. That's how you really define what your market is.
And this is the stuff that you've done that I need to go work through, but I've done it outside of other stuff. It's creating a persona, right? Or your avatar. This is Bill. Bill's 47 years old. He works in this. He's got two kids.
Don't get too caught up in personas either, because that can really.
And I was going to point that out, right? I was going to say like I see a lot of that advice, and like they want to describe where Bill shops and the kind of coffee he drinks. I think that's nuts.
No,
but I'll tell you what I think.
I'm vomiting in my mouth a little.
I did that because I love you. But here's what I do. What I do think it matters is, give me the emotion. Like, I don't care how old you think Bill is or how he parts his hair, or if he has any hair left or whatnot. But I think that if you don't capture the emotion the right way, right, what I call the distinction between their current state, their desired state, and then whatever's holding them back, I think that's what you're missing out on. And when you can start to get that, that's where you can do these repeatable processes. And all I'm pointing out is there's no shame in it. There's no shame in knowing you're in a repeatable process. And I think that's where as security, we bristle. Oh, I hate this. I hate being sold to. Yeah, nobody likes to be sold, but we all like to buy. If you understand the process and you can enlighten yourself to it, look, there's nothing better for a true sales professional for you to say to them, I'm not a prospect. Here's why. By the way, I really like what you do. Let me introduce you to so-and-so. Hey, if you're in sales, you don't want to waste your time. By the way, that's the other benefit of having a defined sales process. You can get really quick at talking to somebody and realizing they're not going to buy. It's going to take too long. They're not a good fit for this. And you can cut bait faster and move on. It doesn't mean be rude. It just means, you know that you don't have to spend time on it, and you can go focus on the things that are going to actually get you the traction you want and get the money. All right. As a kudos, because some of you have written in about lifestyle businesses. We obviously talk a lot about products and things that are scalable because those are the things that get funding. It's very rare that you'll see a consulting business take on some level of funding, especially some level of big funding, because you're not necessarily offering a product. You're offering labor, and if you're smart, you're not just trading time for dollars. So this came across, and I knew I had included 8 key ingredients to a profitable consulting business. Now, I want to point out something that's a little bit of a bugaboo of mine. I see people interchange the word contractor, consultant all the time. And I came up with something a couple years ago to explain the difference. You got a pile of rocks in the front yard and you want them moved. You pay a contractor a set fee and they come with their shovel and they move the rocks. You pay a consultant to come in and assess the right way to move and place the rocks and to get the work done. But when you hire an advisor, the advisor walks up, looks at you and says, "Why are you trying to move the rocks?"
Yeah, I was just going to say, why are you trying to move the rocks?
and so that's always the difference. So there's no shame in this. But if what you do is, hey, I'm really good at XYZ technology on XYZ platform, and I get paid, $100, $200, $300 an hour, that's awesome. You're not consulting at that point. You're contracting. Consulting is the ability to understand a situation and help them optimize their returns. So basically, contracting is, I've got a problem to solve and I've got a bucket of dollars and I'm going to give you the dollars to solve the problem. Consulting is, I've got a bucket of dollars, but I need to be left better than when I started, not just because the problem went away, but because I've created value. So that said, that flows into what they talked about, right? Implement real competitive differentiation. I think this is so important. If the answer is security, what do you do? Security. How do you do it? Security. That's not differentiating yourself. Why you? What problem do you solve? How do you do it? How do I have comfort working with you that you're going to get me to that better place? It talks about visibility, social media to pull clients in. I'll give that a big, maybe, I don't know. The pricing is going to come in. This is where I see people make mistakes. I got to tell you, I'm amazed both at the enterprise side, what we value some stuff at, and I'm amazed at what people accept. And I think the reason is we don't always know. So I'll give you two quick tips. Take your salary, divide that by 2. That's the approximate value of an hour of your time. It's not a measure of your worth. And no, if you like mowing the grass, keep mowing the grass. But let's say you make $100,000 a year, then a value of an hour of your time, at least in a professional setting, is about $50 an hour. That also works then, by the way, if you're going to go charge somebody $100 an hour to do your time, just figure you're really only going to see about half of that. By the time you actually figure out withholding and taxes and other types of things, it's a general rule. Can you do better than that? Absolutely do better than that. But when you're looking at pricing this stuff, you've got to figure that. The other thing I've found, and I don't know how much experience you have on the consulting side, Paul. I know you've done some. Maybe this is limited to me, but I've seen it with others. We're so optimistic. Oh, it's a 10-hour gig. Yeah, maybe if you had no obstructions. But by the time these 3 people have 5 questions and this thing didn't get delayed and you waited on this, it's a 20-hour gig. Yeah. So what I would say is set your pricing for revenue and profit, but also make sure that it all works out. Now, here's the other thing that I think is really important. Don't be an adversary out of the gate. Like, I don't work on an hourly basis. I don't work on a fixed fee basis anymore either. Right. So the next level, and it's much more complicated, and it's even complicated for me at times, it's value basis. But what I always tell people is I will not work on an hourly basis, and here's why. The minute we do hourly basis, I have an inherent interest in increasing my number of hours. Not unethically. I want to give you good service, and it's going to take me 10 hours, and you're interested in me working less hours. We are inherently adversaries at that point, and I think that's an absolutely horrible way to do business. If you do fixed fee projects, which I like, my advice is this: 25% is your buffer. So whatever you think the number is, add 25% to it, yep. and that gives you some of that range. And I'm saying this too, so that at the enterprise, cushion people into this if they're new at it, and help them work it out, because that's how you burn less bridges, right? And guys, listen, I've made these mistakes. That's how I've learned from a lot of these. One of my friends likes to point out I am willfully duped a lot. And I learned a lot in the process. Some lessons you got to learn the hard way. But I wanted to throw this out.
Yeah, number 8 really resonates with me, and largely stems from a conversation that I had with Joe McRae not too long ago. And he said, Paul, I was out there, I was doing pen tests, and he's like, I realized there's a lot of people out there that can go do pen tests. And he's like, what's my differentiator, and how do I maximize repeat business and do more and do better for my clients so that it's a longer standing relationship? He's like, Paul, it's pretty easy. He's like, those of us that have been doing pen testing for a while, we've been in the business for a while. He's like, I just need to figure out where I can add my value. He's like, so I come in, I do a pen test, and then, we pivot from there. He's like, maybe they need solutions in a certain area that I identified in the pen test. So I sit in on vendor calls with them, and I guide them in that regard. He's like, maybe they need to improve their processes in another area. He's like, so I work with them and I help them write all their processes for that particular thing. So there's now lots of areas where Joe is like, I'm pivoting into being an advisor to the company, but my way in the door was a penetration test. And we may do another penetration test down the road, but Joe needed to do number 8, right? And I think he's doing a really good job of that from the success stories that he's provided for us on Paul Security Weekly not too long ago. So
there's a secondary point to that that's really important that echoes a conversation I had this week. If you're good at pen testing, be awesome at pen testing. And don't try to litter your website with, I do pen testing and these 100 other things, because then somebody who doesn't know you says, what do you actually do? But once you've got a customer and you see that they've got some other problems, absolutely point out other ways you can offer them value.
Right.
As you just explained, there's so many reasons why that works. The subtlety is this: find what you're good at, find what your niche is, find how to differentiate yourself, and then don't deviate from that. That's been my lesson for like the last 6 months, and I think it finally set in for me. Mm-hmm. And I commented to somebody yesterday, it only took me a decade to figure it out. And he laughed and he said, yeah, that's about how long it took me too. Mm-hmm. Some of you are going to be much better than us, and you're going to do it a lot faster, and that's great. But the point is, you can do anything you want as a consultant. You don't have to offer everything on your website because you just end up confusing people. Be good at whatever you do. And then with your customers, show them how they can help. By the way, that also means if you have somebody that you're working with that you love, ask them.
Yeah.
Can you help with X, Y, and Z?
Yep.
Some of them can, some of them can't, some of them will, some of them won't. But if you're digging the value that you're getting from them, ask, figure it out. So I think there's some options there.
All right, Michael, we've got some limited time left on this show. Where do you want to take it from here?
Let's go through some of the things. All right, so Yahoo, Verizon cut the price by about, and it looks like that's come out to about $250 million. So there's two things on this that I think are interesting from a startup perspective, right? Yahoo, right? Where nobody thinks they're a startup anymore. This is the first time that we actually maybe have real harm relative to something happening. So Yahoo's been in the news a lot lately. There's going to be speculation to swirl around this for years. But if they really cut the price by $250,000, that's a pretty substantial hit. And that means then that I think we're going to start signaling boards and investors are going to be paying more attention to how you as a startup are handling your security. Yeah. I think that's an opportunity for security startups. I think it's an opportunity for startups. But then here's my caution. Security is fantastic air cover. So was this all just because of that? Or was Verizon a little pissed about the double golden handcuffs and all sorts of other stuff that Yahoo put into the deal? And this was their way of getting back?
Yeah, who knows?
The answer is yes.
You may never know.
But that's it. All right, Blackstone acquired CloudReach. That's interesting because Blackstone makes a lot of investments in and around security. They've been building up security like a pretty good stack portfolio. And CloudReach, right? It's doing cloud stuff. This came up last week, and I only, maybe even 2 weeks ago, but I thought it was interesting. So ForcePoint acquired Skyfence, and it was listed as an undisclosed amount. Well, it's since come out later. It was $40 million. But what's interesting is that Skyfence was actually a division of Imperva. So the whole thing to me was really kind of interesting. And then, based on our recent discussions and feedback and stuff, again, when I start looking at trends on things, right? So Skyfence is a CASB, Cloud Access Security Broker, and that's a pretty big sum of cash.
So wait, if you had a CASB, why would you sell it? Like, why would Imperva sell it?
I wish I had a better answer. I didn't get time to look into it.
That's a hot market. That's kind of questionable to me. I think Imperva we've seen makes questionable decisions with their strategies. Is what I've seen. I mean, no offense to anyone that works there. I'm sure there's great people that work there and all, but I think some of their decisions are somewhat questionable. I mean, unless Skyfence really really sucked, or I don't know. I don't know why you would get rid of a CASB.
If it
that
sucked,
was really good.
I can't. Yeah, if it sucked, I can't imagine that it would go out for $40 million.
That's true. Yeah, I mean, how bad could you suck if you can sell it for $40 million, right?
Yeah, that's the thing. That the part about it. But that's the part I looked at. I went, wait a minute, that's a fast-growing segment, because it's like the Imperva was small. It was like Imperva Skyfence, and I was like, So to be fair, I didn't dig deeper into it. So as we now have a new precedent, if you have some thoughts on that, fill us in. We'll keep it going. The reason I brought that up was because, guys, look, it's cloud, and then even this one. So Arctic Wolf, they raised a $7.3 million Series A, and they're a security as a service platform, and they provide managed detection and response, big data threat detection. So again,
they got the right buzzwords in there at least.
They are buzzword compliant, but that's a big raise, right?
I like that as the name of the episode. Buzzword compliant.
Bingo. We got it. Oh, now I'm a little bit confused because I'm looking at this. So it actually looks like they've raised a total of. All right, so this is. I needed to do a little bit more homework on this.
Yeah, they raised a total of 34. Their series. Wow, that's kind of weird. Why it's Series A at 7.2.
Yeah,
Series B
something
for 20
here
million, and another Series A later.
Yeah, I don't think.
How do you raise a Series A, a Series B, and then another Series A? Unless
you're illiterate, you don't know how to count, maybe.
I don't know.
Or do the alphabet. But
it looked like it all came from the same investment firm. It looks like.
Yeah, so I think there's some stuff here that's kind of interesting. They were a new name to me, and actually, what I grabbed about them was I didn't know them. I actually thought they were a new name. They've been around, I guess, for 4 years. So but what I thought was interesting is we're starting to see people look at more things that they can automate in the cloud, more ways that we can offload. I think what we've heard from our last couple guests across a couple shows are look at your models, right? I would say prevailing themes are stop doing things the way that we've done them for the sake of doing them. Start looking at models, start looking at ways to offload these heavy, repetitive manual tasks that we don't need to do anymore. And by the way, the people that are advocating that, I haven't heard any of them tell me that they have a shortage of talent. Just saying. Gonna go ahead and leave that there. Those are my biggies. Yeah, my journey continues. I think the big thing I shared last time is courtesy of Jonathan Sanders, looking at cognitive load. I spoke at a couple events this week looking at innovation and security and startups in general, and I was able to share the opposite of straight talk is when you get stuck, and friction and the impact. I've got it down to about a 20-25 minute interactive chat, and it is resonating with people. So
I look, 'cause my journey is along those lines very similar, Michael, in that we work for a long time, right? Like a year or more. And we're like, I got like a really cool thing to describe my solution, to describe the problem that I solve, right? And John Strand had one of those like epiphany moments. I don't think he had I had an epiphany moment watching him, and I'm like, this is great. Like he described exactly how our product works on the network with pictures and graphs. And even if you're not ever gonna purchase any products or whatever, if you want to understand the kind of big data collection or the threat analysis that everyone's doing, and machine learning, I guess you could say. John's example was great. It was awesome. He's like, basically, we look at the data in 3 different ways, and here's how we cluster it and we group it, and it was awesome. It was awesome.
And you were like, record that. Okay.
Yeah, it was on a webcast, but and we're going to certainly recycle that material, and I'm going to illustrate it maybe in a video or something, because it was a great representation of what we do. But you know what, too, and I'm going to say as a total compliment to you two, because I see some people that get so excited about the way that they're explaining it and their artful language that they don't let stuff go. And you guys are like, no, but here's a better way. Cool, let's do it. And I think there's a point at which that there's too much churn in that. But I think that what I've also found is people are willing to say, I kind of get it, but not all the way. But hey, come back to me. Let's keep having that conversation. Right. And so that's I think where we both are. I can tell you, still on a roller coaster, but feeling really amped. But here's the really cool thing. What I finally figured out that I do is I help get security projects unstuck. And then, of course, if people are interested, I help them avoid getting stuck again.
Paul, going through things and learning how to explain them and really ease people through the steps actually gave me the chance to look at it again almost with fresh eyes. I'm fired up and excited, but think about how much difference we can make if every guest we have says you got to know what problem you're solving, you got to figure out the value of it, you got to understand how to measure it. Yeah, we can start helping people do that. We're back off onto the right places. So
awesome.
Things are good.
Thanks so much, Michael. That is going to conclude this episode of Startup Security Weekly. Thanks everyone for listening and watching. We'll see everyone next time.